Look, I'm not saying Jake Martinez was the worst salvage operator in the Outer Rim, but his ship's navigation system had a better success rate when it was actively malfunctioning, which, to be fair, was most of the time. Bert, tell me again why we're in Sector 92 instead of Sector 29, Jake asked, piloting his rust bucket of a ship through an asteroid field that looked like someone's cosmic garbage disposal. Because you pressed the wrong button, Jake, as I warned you, 3 times, in increasingly urgent tones. Bert's voice emanated from the ship's speakers with the weary patience of a parent who'd stopped expecting better. Bert stood for Basic Emergency Response Technician, though Jake suspected it actually stood for Barely Endures Ridiculous Troublemaker. Details. Jake waved his hand dismissively, then yanked the controls hard left to avoid a particularly aggressive piece of space debris. Besides, we're not dead yet, so I'm calling this a win. Your definition of winning requires substantial revision. Hey, speaking of wins, what's that? Jake pointed at the view screen where something decidedly non-garbage-like gleamed in the distance. It was massive, pristine, and completely out of place among the floating wrecks and industrial waste. The structure looked like someone had carved a palace out of moonlight and decided the middle of a junkyard was the perfect spot for it. That is what experts would call a terrible idea waiting to happen, Bert replied. I'm detecting energy signatures that predate most known civilizations. The architectural style matches nothing in my databases. In summary, we should leave immediately. Or, Jake said, already adjusting course toward it, we could check it out and possibly find something valuable enough to pay off Vorkak the Terrible. Vorkak the Loan Shark prefers his full title. Vorkak the Loan Shark can prefer whatever he wants from the other side of the galaxy. Jake brought the ship in closer. The structure was even more impressive up close, all sweeping curves and crystalline surfaces that seemed to drink in starlight. Besides, look at this place, it's pristine. Nobody's looted it yet. There are generally excellent reasons why pristine ancient structures remain unlooted, Jake. Reasons involving words like cursed, trapped, and fatally. You worry too much. You worry too little. It's a miracle of statistics that we've survived this long. Jake docked the ship at what looked like a landing platform, which helpfully extended itself as they approached. See? The place was practically inviting them in. He grabbed his standard exploration kit, which consisted of a flashlight, a multi-tool, and an energy bar that expired 2 years ago. I'm documenting this for the inevitable incident report, Bert announced as Jake opened the airlock. Document away, buddy. I've got a good feeling about this one. The structure's entrance yawned before him like the universe's most elegant mouth, and Jake Martinez, salvager extraordinaire and certified bad decision-maker, walked right in. Behind him, Bert's systems whirred with what could only be described as digital resignation. The corridor beyond was exactly what you'd expect from an ancient alien palace, assuming you expected your ancient alien palaces to be absolutely spectacular. Walls of some crystalline material Jake couldn't identify stretched upward into darkness, and the moment his boots touched the floor, soft lights began pulsing to life along the walls. Well, that's not ominous at all, Jake muttered. I've updated the incident report to include probable death trap activation, Bert chimed helpfully through Jake's comm unit. You're such an optimist. But even Jake had to admit this was weird. The lights weren't just turning on, they were following him, creating a path deeper into the structure. It was either incredibly convenient or incredibly suspicious. Jake decided to go with convenient because that required less thinking. He'd been walking for about 10 minutes when he heard the shouting. The shouting was coming from a small bird-like alien who stood barely 4 feet tall but made up for it, with the lung capacity of a foghorn. He was covered in blue and gold feathers, wore what looked like 17 different academic medals, and was currently having an argument with a door. I have been studying your security protocols for 3 standard years, the alien shrieked at the unresponsive surface. I have 17 doctoral degrees. I am the foremost expert on pre-convergent civilizations in this quadrant. You will acknowledge my authority. The door remained impressively unimpressed. Hi? Jake offered. The alien spun around so fast he nearly corkscrewed into the floor. His large eyes, which took up most of his face, went even wider. How did you get past the outer sanctum? I walked. Jake gestured back the way he'd come. The doors just kind of opened. They just kind of... They just kind of... The alien looked like he was experiencing several emotions at once, and none of them were good. Do you have any idea how impossible that is? I've been attempting to bypass the security systems using every known algorithm and several I invented myself. I've decoded 7 layers of encryption. I've performed the ceremonial rites of 12 different ancient religions just in case. And you just walked? I mean, there was some light jogging involved. The alien made a sound like a tea kettle achieving sentience. I am Prime Archaeologist Kralix of the University of Andor Prime. I have devoted my entire adult life to finding this structure. And you're telling me you just wandered in? Pretty much, yeah. I'm Jake, by the way. This is Bert. Jake tapped his comm unit. Hello, Prime Archaeologist Kralix, Bert said politely. I would like to formally distance myself from all of Jake's decisions. Traitor, Jake muttered. Kralix stared at both of them for a long moment, his head feathers ruffling in what Jake guessed was either anger or a stroke. Maybe both. Fine. Fine. If the universe has decided to mock my life's work, at least I can document the mockery. Follow me, human, and try not to accidentally solve any more ancient mysteries by breathing near them. The alien produced a small device that projected a holographic map. With a few swift gestures, he indicated a route deeper into the structure. This is the throne room, the heart of the Lost Empire, the seat of power that has rejected every candidate for 10,000 years. Every candidate? Jake asked, following Kralix down a corridor that was somehow even more impressive than the last one. Every single one. Kralix's voice carried the weight of someone who'd read too many tragic histories. The Lost Empire was the most advanced civilization in galactic history. They conquered death, disease, even disagreements. Their technology makes current science look like banging rocks together. And then one day they just vanished. All of them. Leaving only this structure and the throne. What's so special about the throne? It chooses the worthy, Kralix said, his voice dropping to something almost reverent. Or it did. The Empire's selection process was said to be perfect. No corruption, no politics, just pure evaluation of merit. The Galactic Council has been searching for this place for millennia, hoping to use it to settle disputes, choose leaders, maybe even unite the galaxy under one government again. Let me guess, Bert interjected. It hasn't worked out. The throne has rejected everyone. Heroes, scholars, saints, warriors. The galaxy's absolute best and brightest have sat in that chair, and it's told every single one of them no. Kralix stopped before an enormous set of double doors covered in symbols Jake couldn't read. These doors have never opened in recorded history. I've been trying to translate the lock mechanism for... The doors swung open. Kralix made that tea kettle noise again. The throne room beyond was breathtaking. The chamber stretched upward into what seemed like infinity. Walls covered in crystalline patterns that reflected light in ways that probably violated several laws of physics. At the center of it all sat the throne itself, a massive seat carved from a single piece of crystal that seemed to contain entire galaxies within its structure. Okay, Jake admitted. That's actually pretty cool. Cool? Kralix's voice cracked. Cool? This is the single most important archaeological find in galactic history, and you describe it as cool? I mean, what do you want me to say? It's very cool? Extremely cool? Before Kralix could have an aneurysm, Jake's legs reminded him that he'd been walking for a while, and his back reminded him that his ship seats were designed by someone who hated spines. The throne looked comfortable. Really comfortable. And nobody had sat in it successfully for 10,000 years. So what were the odds he'd be the one? Jake Martinez sat down on the throne. Kralix screamed, "You can't just sit on the... Oh no, oh no, no, no." The throne room exploded with light. Not exploded literally, though that would have been only marginally more surprising than what actually happened. Light erupted from the throne in waves, cascading across the walls, the floor, the ceiling, spreading outward through the entire structure, like someone had just flipped the universe's largest light switch. Jake felt the throne hum beneath him. It wasn't uncomfortable, just weird, like sitting in a chair that was very interested in his medical history. Bert? Is something supposed to be happening? Jake, I'm detecting power levels that shouldn't be possible. The entire structure is coming online. Also, the archaeologist just fainted, so that's happened. Indeed, Kralix had gone down like a sack of particularly academic potatoes. Jake would have checked on him, but the moment he tried to stand, the throne made a sound like a disapproving parent, and he got the distinct impression that standing up right now would be a bad idea. Holographic displays materialized around him, showing text in dozens of languages. Most of them cycled too fast for Jake to read, but a few translated themselves helpfully into standard galactic. Emperor Designate identified. A pleasant synthetic voice announced. Begin coronation protocols. I'm sorry, what? Congratulations, Jake, Bert said, and somehow managed to sound sarcastic, despite being a computer. You've accidentally conquered the galaxy. I didn't conquer anything, I just sat down. That appears to be sufficient. Before Jake could process this information, or more importantly, before he could get up and run away, the throne room doors burst open again. This time, an entire squad of armed soldiers poured in, weapons drawn, moving with the kind of precision that suggested they were very good at their jobs, and Jake was very screwed. No! Leading them was a tall, reptilian alien in military dress that had more metals than fabric. Her scales were deep purple, her eyes were cold yellow, and her expression suggested she'd never smiled in her entire life and did not plan to start now. Step away from the throne, she commanded, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made Jake want to step away from the throne. Unfortunately, when he tried, the throne disagreed. Strongly. I would love to step away from the throne, Jake said quickly. The throne and I are having a difference of opinion about that. The commander's eyes narrowed. I am Commander Vexus of the Galactic Council Security Forces. That throne has been the subject of a council-sanctioned investigation for the past decade. You are interfering with official council business. I'm not interfering. I'm being interfered with. There's a difference. Jake, I should mention that the throne's defensive systems are now active, Bert said calmly. Highly active. Aggressively active. As if on cue, the crystalline walls began to shift, and panels Jake hadn't noticed before slid open to reveal what were definitely weapons, very large weapons, all pointed at Commander Vexus and her troops. Call them off, Vexus demanded, not lowering her weapon. I don't know how. I literally just sat down. This is the worst chair I've ever sat on, and I once sat on a chair made of angry bees. That last part wasn't true, but Jake felt like the situation warranted some hyperbole. The throne has initiated full lockdown protocols, Bert announced. Nobody is leaving this room until the coronation process is complete. On the positive side, the air recycling system is functioning perfectly. We could theoretically survive in here for several years. Bert, that's not positive. I'm trying to find silver linings in our imminent imprisonment. Commander Vexus lowered her weapon slowly, her expression calculating. If what your AI says is true, then we have a situation. The throne hasn't accepted a candidate in 10 millennia. If it's chosen you, that makes you legally the emperor of the Lost Empire. I don't want to be emperor of anything. That's irrelevant. The Galactic Council recognizes the throne's authority. It's in the treaty. Article 47, Section 9, Subsection 12b. If the throne chooses, we're bound by galactic law to acknowledge it. Jake stared at her. You people wrote a law about a throne nobody could sit on. It was a slow council session. Behind Commander Vexus, Kralix groaned and began to wake up. He took one look at Jake still sitting on the throne, still alive, and still surrounded by holographic displays proclaiming him emperor, and promptly fainted again. How long is this coronation thing supposed to take? Jake asked. According to the database I'm accessing, approximately 72 hours, Bert replied cheerfully. I'm sure you'll be very comfortable. Jake looked down at the throne beneath him, glowing with ancient power and terrible decision-making skills. He looked at Commander Vexus, who was radiating barely contained frustration. He looked at Kralix, who was having what appeared to be stress dreams on the floor. Can anyone get me a sandwich? Jake asked. I feel like I should at least get a sandwich out of this. The throne's holographic displays flickered, and a panel opened in the armrest to reveal what was definitely not a sandwich, but might have been food about 10,000 years ago. I'm going to die in this chair, aren't I? Jake muttered. Statistically, dying of old age in an emperor's throne isn't the worst fate, Bert offered. I can name at least 6 worse ways you've almost died this month alone. Outside the structure, as the lights blazed across the cosmos for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy began to take notice. And somewhere, In various corners of space, 3 very important and very angry individuals received the same message. The throne had chosen. After all this time, the throne had finally chosen, and it had chosen someone named Jake Martinez, who was currently trapped in a chair and really wished he'd just paid off his parking tickets instead. 12 hours into what Jake was now calling the worst sitting experience in human history, things got complicated, which was impressive considering they'd already been pretty complicated. Incoming vessels, Commander Vexus announced, checking her tactical display. Multiple ships. Oh, this is going to be unpleasant. More unpleasant than being trapped in a magic chair? Jake asked. He'd been passing the time by seeing how many holographic displays he could make appear at once. Current record, 47. Most of them were showing him things he couldn't read. Much more unpleasant. Vexus gestured to her troops who took up defensive positions. The news has spread. The candidates are coming. What candidates? The ones who think they deserve the throne more than you. As if on cue, the throne room doors, which Jake had assumed were sealed, opened smoothly. 3 figures strode in, each accompanied by their own entourage of supporters, bodyguards, and in one case, someone whose entire job appeared to be carrying an ornate cushion. The first figure was tall, slender, and wore robes that looked like they cost more than Jake's ship. Multiple arms emerged from the robes, each holding a different scholarly device. His head was elongated with facial features that suggested centuries of careful breeding for intelligence. He looked at Jake the way someone might look at gum on their shoe. "I am Prime Scholar Thendrix," he announced, his voice dripping with the kind of superiority that came from too many degrees and not enough real-world experience. "I have studied the throne's selection protocols for 30 years. I have authored 47 treatises on the Lost Empire. I have been preparing my entire life for this moment." He pointed one of his many fingers at Jake. "And you are sitting in my chair." "Actually," Jake said, "I think it's the chair's chair. I'm just renting." The second figure pushed forward before Thendrix could respond. She was humanoid, covered in sleek silver cybernetics that probably cost more than a small planet. Her eyes glowed with implanted tech, and her smile had the warmth of a corporate merger. "Lady Cora," she introduced herself. "Chief Executive of the Cora Industrial Collective. I control 17% of the galactic economy. I have brought prosperity to thousands of worlds. I have the resources, the connections, and the vision to actually use the throne's power effectively." She looked Jake up and down, unlike some random salvager in a chair. "Hey, I'm an excellent salvager," Jake protested. "Ask anyone. Okay, don't ask my creditors, but ask some other people." The third figure didn't announce himself. He was massive, covered in scarred armor, with 4 arms that ended in claws designed for ripping things apart. His species was one Jake recognized, the Croathi, known across the galaxy for being universally terrible at peaceful negotiation and universally excellent at warfare. "General Croth," Commander Vexus said, her hand moving to her weapon. "I should have known you'd show up." "Commander," Croth growled. "The throne of the Lost Empire is a military asset. It should be wielded by a warrior, not a scholar, a businesswoman, or whatever that is." He gestured dismissively at Jake. "That is a human having a very bad day," Jake replied. "And before any of you start plotting, the throne won't let me leave. Believe me, I've tried. It's very attached, literally." Prime Scholar Thendrix approached the throne, his multiple eyes analyzing the holographic displays. "Fascinating. The throne has indeed accepted you into the coronation process, but this must be an error. The throne's selection algorithms are based on merit, intelligence, and leadership capability. He waved vaguely at Jake. "You." "I'm right here. I can hear you." "My point exactly." Lady Cora was already working on her own handheld device, her cybernetic fingers moving in a blur. "I'm accessing the throne's external interfaces. There must be an override protocol, something that will reset the selection." "I wouldn't do that," Bert warned. "The throne's defensive systems are quite touchy. They've already targeted 17 different weapon systems just in this room." "Your AI is correct," Kralik said weakly from where he'd finally managed to sit up against a wall. "The throne cannot be forced. It can only be convinced, or its chosen candidate can voluntarily abdicate." All three newcomers turned to look at Jake with expressions that ranged from calculating to openly hostile. "Yeah, about that," Jake said quickly. "I would love to abdicate. I super want to abdicate, but there's this little problem where every time I try to stand up, the throne threatens to vaporize everyone in the room. So maybe we table the abdication until after the coronation?" "Unacceptable," General Croth snarled. "I have conquered 12 systems. I have never accepted defeat. I will not accept it now." "The galaxy doesn't care about your acceptance," Commander Vexus interjected. "Galactic law is clear. If the throne chooses, we honor that choice." "Perhaps," Prime Scholar Thendrix said thoughtfully, "we should verify the choice. The throne is said to test its candidates. If this human cannot pass the tests, then clearly the selection was premature." "Now wait a minute," Jake started, but the throne had apparently been listening. The holographic displays shifted, new text appearing in languages Jake actually understood. His understanding was not improved by the text itself. "Preliminary authentication complete. Begin psychological evaluation. Phase 1 of 7. 7 phases? Jake groaned. "Can't we just skip to the end? I'm good at multiple choice." "The throne does not offer multiple choice," Kralik said, and for the first time he actually sounded sympathetic. "It offers impossible scenarios, leadership situations with no good answers. It's how it determines if a candidate has the wisdom to rule." The holographic displays began projecting a scenario around Jake. It was remarkably detailed, showing a star system in crisis. Multiple planets, multiple factions, multiple disasters all happening at once. The display was asking him to prioritize, to choose who to save and who to let die. Prime Scholar Thendrix leaned forward eagerly. "This is the famous Crucible scenario. I've studied it extensively. There are exactly 7 viable solutions, each with specific ethical frameworks. I could solve this in approximately 4.3 minutes. "Good for you," Jake muttered, staring at the scenario. It was horrible. No matter what choice he made, people would die. That was clearly the point. The throne wanted to see how he handled impossible choices, so Jake made the most human decision possible. He looked at the scenario, looked at all the complicated political implications and ethical frameworks, and said, "Nope, this is stupid." The room went silent. "Excuse me?" Thendrix's voice was faint. "This whole scenario, it's designed to be unsolvable. You're asking me to choose which group of people deserves to die less. That's not leadership, that's sadism with extra steps." Jake gestured at the holographic displays. "In the real world, you don't get these clean choices. You improvise. You find the third option that nobody thought about because they were too busy setting up their impossible scenario." "There is no third option," Lady Cora said flatly. "Sure there is. You redistribute the resources, establish emergency protocols, create mutual aid networks between the factions. Yeah, it's messy and imperfect, and nobody gets everything they want, but at least you're not playing God with people's lives." Jake leaned back in the throne. "Next question." The holographic displays flickered. The scenario vanished. New text appeared. "Response logged. Acceptable. Proceed to phase 2. Prime Scholar Thendrix looked like he'd been slapped with a fish. "That shouldn't have worked. That's not one of the established solutions." "Maybe that's the point," Commander Vexus said quietly, studying Jake with new interest. General Croth growled. "One test means nothing. Let's see how the human handles the next 6. Jake settled deeper into the throne, which was finally starting to feel less like a trap and more like a really persistent interview chair. "Bring it on. I've dealt with worse. I once had to explain to an angry warlord why I accidentally sold his favorite ship to a museum. This is practically relaxing." "Your definition of relaxing requires substantial revision," Bert said. Outside the throne room, more ships were arriving. The galaxy was watching now, and the story spreading across the stars was impossible to believe. An unknown human, sitting on the throne that rejected everyone, passing tests that shouldn't be passable, somehow stumbling toward becoming the emperor of the lost empire. And the really crazy part? He was passing the tests by treating them like annoying customer complaints. The galaxy, quite frankly, didn't know what to make of that. 6 hours and 5 additional tests later, Jake Martinez was discovering something interesting about himself. Specifically, that he was apparently very good at making ancient alien intelligences angry. "This is absurd," Prime Scholar Thendrix muttered, reviewing the data on his devices for the 20th time. "You solved the resource allocation paradox by suggesting everyone just share nicely." "And it worked," Jake pointed out. "You addressed the military strategy simulation by refusing to engage in warfare and instead implementing what you called aggressively persistent diplomacy. Also worked. You handled the ethical governance scenario by establishing checks and balances and then admitting you didn't know everything. Revolutionary, I know." Thendrix looked like his brain was trying to escape through his ears. "You're not supposed to pass by being ignorant." "I prefer the term honestly self-aware," Jake said. He'd actually started to get comfortable in the throne, which was probably a bad sign. "Look, I'm not the smartest person in the galaxy. I'm probably not even the smartest person in this room, which is saying something because I'm competing with a cushion carrier." He nodded at the servant still holding Lady Cora's ornate pillow. "But I know what I don't know. That's got to count for something." "It shouldn't," Lady Cora said, though her tone had shifted from hostile to calculating. "The throne is supposed to select for competence, not humility." "Perhaps," Kralik said from his corner where he'd been frantically taking notes. "The throne is selecting for something else entirely." He looked up, his large eyes bright with realization. "What if we've been misunderstanding the selection criteria for 10,000 years? "Explain," Commander Vexus ordered. "The Lost Empire fell because it became too perfect," Kralik said, standing up and gesturing animatedly. "They had conquered every problem. They had the best leaders, the most efficient systems, the most advanced technology. They had eliminated chaos, uncertainty, random chance. They had perfected civilization." He paused. "And then they vanished. All of them. In a single day." "Your point?" General Croth growled. "My point is that maybe perfection killed them. Maybe they became so optimized, so efficient, so utterly without flaw that they lost something essential: adaptability, creativity, the ability to handle problems they hadn't already solved." Kralik looked at Jake. "The throne isn't looking for the best candidate. It's looking for someone who thinks differently. Someone who hasn't been trained by the systems that failed." "So you're saying the throne chose Jake because he's unqualified?" Thendrix said flatly. "I'm saying the throne chose Jake because he's uncorrupted by our assumptions." Jake raised his hand. "Can the chosen one get a bathroom break? This has been going on for like 8 hours." "The coronation process cannot be interrupted," Bert said apologetically. "However, I've located the waste management functions in your armrest. You're going to want to press the blue crystal, not the red one. The red one appears to deploy orbital weapons." "Why is that even an option in an armrest?" The Lost Empire had very different ideas about personal space. Before Jake could contemplate the philosophical implications of weaponized furniture, the throne's displays shifted again. This time the text was different, more formal, more final. "Final authentication phase. Leadership synthesis examination." "Oh good," Jake muttered. "I was worried we'd run out of ways to test my accidental qualifications." The holographic displays expanded, filling the entire throne room with scenarios. But these weren't questions. They were situations pulled directly from current galactic events. Border disputes, trade conflicts, succession crises. The throne was showing him the actual problems facing the actual galaxy right now, and it was asking him what he'd do about them. Jake stared at the scenarios, feeling the weight of them. These weren't theoretical exercises. These were real problems affecting real people. Some he recognized from news broadcasts. Others were clearly classified information that the throne had pulled from somewhere. "I can't solve all of these," Jake said quietly. "Finally," Thendrix said, "an admission of defeat. No, I mean I physically cannot solve all of these, nobody could. They're too big, too complicated, too interconnected." Jake looked at the displays, at the web of conflicts and crises spreading across known space. "You'd need an entire government to handle this. A really good government with lots of smart people and resources and time. The throne is meant to provide that government," Lady Cora said. "The Emperor of the Lost Empire had absolute authority. You could reshape the galaxy." "Yeah, and that's the problem." Jake stood up slowly. For the first time since he'd sat down, the throne let him. "You're all looking for someone to fix everything. One person with one throne making all the decisions, but that's not how you solve galaxy-sized problems. He walked away from the throne, and surprisingly, the defensive systems didn't activate. The lights didn't dim. If anything, they grew brighter. The Lost Empire failed because they put all their trust in one system, Jake continued. They found the perfect way to choose leaders and then assumed that was enough. But what happens when the perfect system runs into a problem it wasn't designed for? What happens when perfection meets reality? It breaks, Kralix whispered. It all breaks. Exactly. Jake turned back to the throne. I could sit in that chair. I could probably even do a decent job for a while. But eventually I'd make the same mistakes. I'd become another perfect solution that fails when things get imperfect. The throne's displays shifted one final time. New text appeared in a script so old that even Kralix gasped. Translation, Bert? The throne says, congratulations. You've passed the final test. By refusing the throne? General Croth looked confused, which was apparently his default state. Not refusing, Kralix said, reading the ancient text with wonder. Understanding. The throne doesn't want a perfect emperor. It wants someone who knows they shouldn't be emperor. That's the stupidest selection criteria I've ever heard, Thendrix said. And yet, Commander Vexus said, lowering her weapon completely, it makes perfect sense. Absolute power should only be given to those who don't want it, who understand the responsibility, who know their own limitations. Jake looked at the throne, at the candidates, at the mess of a situation he'd accidentally created. Okay, so what happens now? I passed your test by understanding I shouldn't pass your test. That's some catch-22 nonsense right there. The throne hummed and a new holographic interface appeared. This one was different, simpler. It showed a countdown timer and a single question in Standard Galactic that everyone could read. Will you accept the throne temporarily to prevent galactic destabilization with the understanding that your primary duty is to establish a proper system of democratic governance? Jake read it 3 times. Did the throne just ask me to take the job so I can work myself out of a job? Essentially, yes, Bert confirmed. And if I say no? Then the throne remains empty. The power vacuum continues, and these 3 start a war over who deserves to sit where you're standing, Commander Vexus said bluntly. Jake looked at Prime Scholar Thendrix, who was brilliant, but would probably optimize the galaxy into oblivion. At Lady Cora, who would run civilization like a profitable business. At General Croth, who thought military conquest was a valid form of governance. You're saying I have to take the throne to stop these people from taking the throne. Succinct, but accurate, Bert agreed. Jake Martinez, salvager, debtor, and the galaxy's most reluctant emperor-elect, looked up at the crystalline ceiling and wondered what he'd done to deserve this. Then he remembered. He'd sat down. That was literally it. Fine, he said. I'll do it, but I want some conditions. You're accepting the throne that rules the galaxy, Lady Cora said incredulously. What conditions could you possibly need? Jake grinned. It was not a nice grin. Oh, you're going to love this. 3 days later, Jake Martinez stood before the throne again, but this time he wasn't sitting on it. He was standing next to it, which was an improvement in multiple ways, including the whole not being trapped by ancient alien furniture thing. The throne room had transformed into something resembling a galactic summit. Representatives from dozens of worlds had arrived, along with council officials, media drones, and more importantly, legal experts who'd spent 72 hours straight drafting what Jake was calling the galaxy's most important resignation letter. We are gathered here today, Commander Vexus announced, her voice carrying through the chamber, to witness the formal coronation and subsequent restructuring of Imperial authority. Can we skip the formal parts? Jake asked. No offense, but I've been doing formal for 3 days straight and I'm about ready to scream. This is a historic occasion, Prime Scholar Thendrix protested. He'd spent the last 3 days alternating between being impressed by Jake's unorthodox solutions and being horrified by Jake's unorthodox solutions. Proper ceremony is required. Proper ceremony is boring. Let's get to the good stuff. Vexus actually smiled. It was small, but it was there. Very well. Jake Martinez, do you accept the throne of the Lost Empire and all the responsibilities and authorities it carries? I do, Jake said. For now. And do you swear to use this authority to establish a fair and democratic system of governance? I do. Immediately. Then by the authority vested in me as commander of the Galactic Council Security Forces, and in accordance with the throne's selection, I declare you Emperor of the Lost Empire. She paused. You may now sit. Jake sat on the throne one more time. The lights blazed, the systems activated, and for a brief moment, he felt the full weight of the Empire's power. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. It was definitely something nobody should have absolute control over. Which is why Jake immediately stood up again. Okay, first order of business. I hereby establish the Transitional Democratic Council, consisting of representatives from all major galactic factions, including some people who are going to be very annoyed I'm appointing them. Lady Cora narrowed her eyes. Such as you, Lady Cora. You know economics. Prime Scholar Thendrix, you know history and politics. General Croth, you know military strategy. Commander Vexus, you know security. And Kralix, you know more about this throne than anyone alive. Jake gestured to each of them. You're all qualified. You're all capable. You just all wanted the power for yourselves. So here's the deal. You work together, or you get nothing. You cannot simply appoint us, Thendrix protested. I'm the Emperor. I can literally do whatever I want. That's the problem with absolute power. It's absolute. Jake crossed his arms. The throne stays here. It stays active. But it doesn't choose one person anymore. It becomes a tool for the Council. A way to verify decisions, resolve disputes, access the Lost Empire's knowledge. But no single person sits on it permanently. Ever. That's not how empires work, General Croth growled. Good. Empires are terrible. Let's try something else. Bert's voice emerged from Jake's comm with what could only be described as pride. I've just transmitted the full legal framework to all parties. It includes term limits, democratic elections, constitutional amendments, and a clause that specifically prevents anyone named Jake Martinez from holding office ever again. That last part was my idea, Jake said cheerfully. I'm immunizing myself against future responsibility. Lady Cora was reading through the documents on her device, her cybernetic eyes scanning at inhuman speed. This is actually well structured. Surprisingly so. The economic provisions alone would stabilize 7 different trade disputes. Did you write this? Me? No. I had Bert do it while I was taking my 17 bathroom breaks. Turns out when you trap someone in a chair for 3 days, they have a lot of time to think about governmental structure. This could work, Commander Vexus said slowly, reviewing her own copy. It would require cooperation. Compromise. Actually listening to each other. Horrible, I know, Jake agreed. But the alternative is you all fight over the throne until someone wins, and becomes exactly the kind of autocrat the galaxy doesn't need. So what do you say? Want to try democracy? It's like autocracy, but with more arguments and less genocidal purging. Prime Scholar Thendrix looked at Lady Cora. Lady Cora looked at General Croth. General Croth looked at Commander Vexus. None of them looked happy, but they all looked thoughtful. I have conditions, Thendrix said finally. Everyone has conditions. That's what negotiation is for. Jake grinned. Welcome to democracy. It's going to be frustrating. The throne pulsed once, a soft glow of approval. On the holographic displays, new text appeared. Ancient text that Kralix translated with shaking hands. The throne accepts this solution. It was designed to find not a ruler but a catalyst. Someone who would break the cycle. Someone who would choose cooperation over domination. Kralix looked up at Jake. You passed the final test by understanding there shouldn't be a final test. The throne was waiting for someone wise enough to make themselves obsolete. So the ancient alien superintelligence wanted someone to establish democracy and then quit. Jake shook his head. Your lost empire was weird. They were trying to save future civilizations from their mistakes, Kralix said softly. They failed themselves, but they left behind a way for others to succeed. Jake looked at the throne one last time, at the crystalline seat that had caused so much trouble, held so much power, and apparently had a better understanding of political science than half the galaxy. Thanks for the trust, I guess. Try not to trap anyone else in your furniture. The throne dimmed slightly, which Jake chose to interpret as agreement. So what happens now? Commander Vexus asked. You've established the council. You've reformed the system. What about you? Me? I'm going back to salvaging. I've got debts to pay and a ship that needs repairs. Jake started walking toward the exit, then paused. Oh, and I'm keeping the title. Emperor Emeritus Jake Martinez has a nice ring to it. Should help with the creditors. You're just leaving? Lady Cora asked. You have access to the greatest power in the galaxy and you're just walking away? That's the point. If I don't walk away, I become the problem. Jake waved at the assembled representatives. You all are smart enough to figure this out. You don't need an emperor. You never did. You just needed someone to remind you that you're better together than apart. That's remarkably philosophical for a salvager, Thendrix noted. I watch a lot of historical documentaries when I can't sleep. You pick things up. Jake reached the door, then turned back one more time. Oh, and if this council thing doesn't work out, the throne will know. And trust me, you don't want to disappoint furniture that's been waiting 10,000 years for someone to get it right. Bert spoke up one final time. Jake, I should mention that 17 different factions are trying to contact us with job offers. Apparently being the emperor who quit has made you very popular. Tell them I'm busy. I've got a date with a junkyard and a very aggressive creditor named Vorkak. Vorkak the loan shark is offering to forgive your debt in exchange for an autograph. Jake stopped walking. Really? Really? Apparently your story has become quite famous. There's already a holodrama in production. They're calling it The Throne That Waited. Do I get royalties? You're the emperor. You could demand royalties. Emeritus Emperor. There's a difference. Jake thought for a moment. Tell Vorkak I'll sign his autograph in exchange for debt forgiveness and a sandwich. A good sandwich. I've been eating 10,000-year-old rations for 3 days. 6 months later, Jake Martinez was exactly where he wanted to be, which was in the cockpit of his ship, flying through an asteroid field, minding his own business and occasionally salvaging things that did not belong to anyone who'd admit to owning them. Bert, please tell me we're going the right direction this time. We are precisely on course for Sector 29, Jake. No wrong turns, no accidental discoveries of ancient alien artifacts, no thrones that trap people. Music to my ears. Jake leaned back in his seat, which was still uncomfortable but at least didn't claim to be sovereign over multiple star systems. How's the galaxy doing? Still democratic? The Transitional Council has successfully resolved 12 major disputes and established democratic frameworks on 47 worlds. Prime Scholar Thendrix and Lady Cora argue constantly, but produce excellent policy. General Croth is learning diplomacy, and only threatens military action twice a week now. Commander Vexus chairs the Security Committee. Kralix has been appointed head of Imperial Archaeology and has published a best-selling book about your 3 days on the throne. Is it accurate? He describes you as accidentally profound. I think that's fair. Jake grinned. I'll take it. Any word from the throne itself? It remains active but unseated, exactly as you designed it. The Council uses it for dispute resolution and accessing the Lost Empire's databases. Several factions attempted to claim it again, but the throne rejected all of them. Apparently it's decided democracy is preferable. Smart chair. A proximity alert beeped. Jake checked his sensors and groaned. There was a distress signal coming from a nearby sector. It was from a region marked as unexplored and potentially dangerous. Bert, tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing. I am seeing a clear opportunity to ignore a distress signal and continue to our destination, where we have a legitimate salvage contract and no chance of accidentally becoming royalty again. But the signal indicates life-threatening danger, and we're the closest ship. Jake looked at the distress signal. He looked at his navigation readout showing the safe, boring, profitable route ahead. He thought about comfortable chairs, predictable outcomes, and the benefits of not having galactic-scale responsibilities. Then he turned the ship toward the distress signal. Jake, what are you doing? The right thing. Probably. Maybe. We'll find out. I'm documenting this decision for the inevitable incident report. You always do, buddy. You always do. As the ship accelerated toward whatever disaster awaited them, Jake Martinez, former emperor, current salvager, and permanent bad decision-maker, smiled. The galaxy was a big place, full of problems and complications and thrones that tested people in weird ways. But it was also full of opportunities to help, to make a difference, to accidentally stumble into doing the right thing even when the right thing was inconvenient. And if he was very lucky, maybe this time there wouldn't be any furniture involved. Behind him, unheard in the vacuum of space, Bert calculated the probability of this mission going sideways. The results were not encouraging, but Bert had learned something important over the past 6 months. Sometimes the right choice was the improbable one. Sometimes wisdom looked like stubbornness, and sometimes the best leaders were the ones who didn't want to lead at all. "Jake?" Bert asked as they approached the distress signal. "Yeah? For what it's worth, I'm glad the throne chose you." "Thanks, Bert. I'm glad you're here to document all my terrible decisions. Someone has to." And together the salvager and his AI flew toward their next adventure, leaving behind an empire they'd saved by refusing to rule it, a throne that waited patiently for its next lesson, and a galaxy that was slowly learning that sometimes the best government was the one where everyone had to actually work together, even if it meant more arguments, more compromise, and significantly less comfortable seating.